Well, here we are at the end of the campaign, a campaign that's really mattered. The polls have flipped. Labor finishes the race in front. Peter Dutton had multiple missteps and his personal standing has fallen. We're yet to see, though, whether this will translate into a Labor victory, either a minority or a majority Labor government. It's what the polls are suggesting is most likely to happen. Millions have already cast their ballots, but we don't know until those results are actually in and those votes are counted. I'm keen now, though, to explore what we've learned from this campaign over the last 5 weeks. What policies have resonated, what messages have stuck, which moments were turning points that might go down in political history. I'm David Speers on Gadigal Country in Sydney. Welcome to Insiders on Background. Ryan Liddell is a former advisor to Bill Shorten, and Andrew Carswell is a former advisor to Scott Morrison. They've both been involved in many campaigns and have been watching this one very closely as well. Good to talk to both of you at the end of the campaign. We spoke at the start of the campaign, so I'm very pleased that you've got some time to join us as we reach the end of this campaign. How are you both?
Good, thanks, Fizzy.
Well, good to be on the outside.
Yeah, exactly, especially at this point, I'm sure. Not quite as nerve-wracking. Well, let me start with a question to both of you. Who won this campaign and why? Andrew?
I think it was a struggle for both, really. I mean, it's a campaign that really struggled to catch the imagination of the public. I think the public were very much disengaged from the outset, and whenever they popped their head into the campaign, they quickly ran in the other direction. So I think both leaders had their moments. Peter Dutton struggled early on in the campaign. He got better. There was a few missteps along the way. It was a bit of a disjointed campaign from the coalition, whereas Anthony Albanese started well. And increasingly became the old Anthony Albanese throughout the campaign, where he mumbled, he talked a lot, he let the hubris get a hold of him a little bit too much. So I think both leaders had their moments and their weaker moments during the campaign.
Yeah, Ryan, what do you think?
I think Andrew's being a little bit kind to the coalition. I think the coalition's campaign was an absolute horror show from the get-go. And I don't say that lightly. If you look at across all the sort of factors, the daily sort of politics, the policy release, candidates being taking up a lot of the national sort of conversation for on the basis of scandals and all that. I don't think there's one day you could objectively point to that the coalition won during the campaign. And I think the reason why the Labor Party did so well compared to the coalition, in my view, was that they were agile, but they were also disciplined. They were agile insofar as responding to events outside their control, i.e., Tropical Cyclone Alfred, the factors, Trump factors, and missteps and mistakes from the coalition. But they're also highly disciplined insofar as the issues they were focused on and their messaging as well. It was relentless, and they were merciless when it came to, putting the foot to the throat on the coalition on their mistakes. So repeatedly, it was over and over again. It was the mistakes that Dutton had made were featuring on the news at night.
Yeah, and I want to come to perhaps some of the negative campaigning as well. But Andrew, all campaigns, you're going to have missteps or mistakes or falling off stages and things like that. But do you think for Peter Dutton, there were more policy problems, whether things left too late or having to reverse course on something like work from home? Were they more substantive problems?
I think so. I mean, if you wind it back to February, Peter Dutton was favourite to win this election. They were ahead in the polls. So I think there was this mindset of small target. Let's just wind it back and be a small target and just try and coast through on those kind of traditional kind of small target opposition ethos.
And I think you made this point, in fact, when we spoke at the start of the campaign, that you can't just rely on that sort of coasting through.
You can't coast your way to 20 seats. And so I think they quickly realised that was not the case. So when they went from 39 to 35% on primaries, they realised that they quickly had to sell a narrative that was better than what they were selling then. So we saw the intervention of policy that was far too late in the campaign. Some of them were good policies. The defence policy is a great policy, but we should have been talking about that last year.
Why was that left so late?
There was back and forth between, I think, the travelling party and CCHQ about when to do that in the campaign. So I think there was a little bit of confusion when to kind of put that.
So what the campaign headquarters wanted it earlier, do you think, or?
Well, defence is one of those things that's really baked in. I'm not sure why you would want to talk about defence at the back end of a campaign when you have a 19-point lead on the Labor Party on defence and national security. You kind of don't need to take it to 20. So there's that kind of lateness element. The thing that I struggled with through the campaign, and I think Peter did a good job of pushing through this element, was there was not enough consistent daily concentration on the economic plan. That concise messaging that needs to occur in the last 2 weeks of a campaign. We probably didn't see enough of that.
Yeah, and you kind of touch on it there, this issue about how well the travelling leaders team works with the campaign headquarters. And again, I think at the start of the campaign, we talked about how the leaders team kind of has to hand over control to a degree to the campaign headquarters to run the campaign. But has that been a problem on the coalition side, the relationship between the campaign headquarters and the leader?
There's certainly been some trust issues and a difference of opinion on where to go on certain messages. Andrew Hurst is a very good operator, similar to Paul in the Labor Party. They're very good, effective campaigners, and you have to trust them. You have to hand over the keys to the car and go. We're going based on what you see, what you're seeing in research, what the polling says, what your groups say. You have to trust your leader in party headquarters, and probably there hasn't been that level of trust that we would normally see.
Yeah, Ryan, in terms of the moments that might have turned things in this campaign, the memorable moments, but also those that might have shifted momentum one way or another or accelerated momentum, what would you point to?
Oh, it was funny. You go back to the start of the campaign, it feels like an eternity ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But early on, from the get-go, Peter Dutton musing about how he'd live in Kirribilli, that kind of set the tone pretty early for some fairly aggressive sort of attacks from the government on Dutton. And I think that kind of put the coalition's campaign into a little bit of disarray. I think that was an early sort of moment. I think one of the main defining moments of the campaign was the work from home sort of backflip. That was that was the biggest sort of turnaround I can remember in an election, having to sort of go out there and say everything you've been saying for the last couple of months, just, scrap that. This is our new sort of paradigm, and then the way they sort of kind of tried to sort of weasel out of that looked a little bit disingenuous when they refused to accept the fact that it wasn't necessarily the policy that was bad. It was, it was the Labor lies, supposedly, around it. So that looked a little bit difficult. But I think coming to Andrew's point, cost of living and housing, but cost of living in particular, first, second and third most important issue this campaign. It's incredibly indulgent for a political party to go out there and start talking about, welcome to country, like this week, those sort of cultural attacking the ABC, going after journalists, like those sort of, there's only so much time you get in an election campaign to talk about the issues and to communicate to swing voters the reasons as to why they should vote for you. And if you're occupying the space with those sorts of issues that aren't going to shift votes, then you're losing their campaign and you're wasting that time.
Yeah, it's interesting just on that because, I mean, there is a view that this was deliberate, and I've even spoken to people in Labor who are a little nervous that it might actually help, what Peter Dutton's here might actually work in attracting disengaged voters, particularly on the right who might be drifting off to One Nation, to throw this in the mix. Andrew, what do you think? Was it a deliberate move, do you think, to bring up things around welcome to countries and The Voice and so on this week?
Yeah, I think so. I don't fully subscribe to the view that this was a throwing a bone to the right. I think concerns in this space go well beyond right-wing Australians. I think there is a kind of common sense approach that needs to be taken there. So I think it was a broader appeal. And sure, it will no doubt bring some of that leakage back from what's going to, say, One Nation, Clive Palmer and other minor parties on the right. But I think it was designed to capture that kind of soft audience, and really not from an offensive kind of way, but a suggestive of, well, we need to have a common sense approach here.
And Andrew, when it comes to those memorable moments of the campaign, what would you point to? What do you think really mattered?
Of this campaign?
Yeah.
That is a very good question. There weren't many highlights, to be honest. I mean, the debates were hit and miss, I think. It's really hard to kind of define what was the key moment. I think Ryan is right. The first week really set the tone for the campaign, and that was Anthony's ability to land a message clearly in that first week, and Peter's inability to come across as firm in his view and firm in the messaging that he was trying to sell. I think that kind of set the tone, and then we went into that sleepy period in the middle, and we're coming out on the other side, and it's almost like Peter's he's been fighting the clock all the way through, really, because he's come out of that period at Easter and thought, okay, well, I've only got a certain amount of days to go. So it was very much advantageous, this time frame, for the Labor Party to kind of squash that amount of time that Peter had to sell his message.
Yeah, and look, his policies were left late, but costings too. Now, this isn't unique to the coalition. Labor did this last time from opposition as well, left until the Thursday before the election to put their numbers out there. Why are the numbers always left so late? Ryan, I'll go to you on that. And do people who are voting, at the very end or on election day, do they really focus on those costings much?
I think the reason why they're left so late, Spearsy, is to lessen the amount of time, the scrutiny that can be put on sort of numbers in the lead up to sort of election day. And doing this sort of stuff from opposition's hard. You don't have the resources of government. You don't have, the resources of Treasury and the Department of Finance to actually.
There's a parliamentary budget office though these days.
There is. You're right. There is a PBO, and we always made a practice of getting all our policies are costed through the PBO. So that's a good point. But if one of the main messages you're trying to sell is as a responsible economic manager, and then you sort of wait until 36 hours before the polls open to sort of stand up and talk about how you're going to pay for things, and spending and debt and fiscal management has been like quite a strong sort of thing through the campaign. It looks pretty disingenuous and looks cynical, and I think that's what it goes to, that authenticity. And you can't really sort of ask voters to trust you with that sort of idea around economic management if you're not willing to sort of front up with them in the first place.
And the thing that struck me in those costings yesterday, Andrew, was that sure, over 4 years the bottom line would be better under the coalition, but over the next couple of years it would be worse. The deficits would be deeper, and it just seems that really runs counter to all we've heard from the coalition for the last 3 years, right? About reckless spending and the need to get the budget back into shape. Did that surprise you?
No, I don't think so, and nor did the timing, to be honest, as well. I mean, there's two reasons you leave it this late. I mean, this is the most important week of the campaign. And you get to have a day where you're talking about the number one topic that you need to be talking about, the economy, the cost of living, the shape of the budget, showing that you are good economic managers. So I think the timing is important, but it's also warding against and rightly so in the case of the Labor Party, warding against a scare campaign on numbers. And Anthony Albanese has been incredibly loose with the truth when it comes to coalition policies and the extent of which they would go. He's been incredibly dishonest about the nuclear policy. He's been incredibly dishonest about what the coalition may or may not do on Medicare. So it's no wonder that the coalition are leaving it late to ward off that scare campaign that seems to be a feature of Labor campaigns.
Yeah, and just on that, I mean, Ryan, it sort of goes back and forth, the coalition accusing the Labor of planning to bring back the voice and so on. But we have seen from Labor, to Andrew's point, pretty clear scare campaigns on Medicare and nuclear as well, the cost at least of nuclear. Is this just normal now in campaigning to really take things to the nth degree?
I really don't buy that whole scare campaign stuff, and you might expect me to say that, but this is the reason why. I mean, politics is the art of convincing, right? And so, if you're a politician these days or a political party and you're going to run an argument which has no basis in truth, you're going to get found out pretty quickly, right? The reason why some of these campaigns have been effective is because there is truth to them. There are proof points around when Peter Dutton was health minister, the fact they're all over, the coalition's all over the shop when it comes to the cost of nuclear.
Sure, but the point is taking the most exaggerated number you can to scare voters?
I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think the reason why it's been successful and the reason why the Labor Party's been successful is just because they've been disciplined and they've been focused on it. Like every time you hear, Jim Chalmers or the Prime Minister talk about the coalition when it comes to economic management, they're always talking about cuts and they're always linking it to nuclear and to Medicare because they know that from their research. That's what's effective.
It has been effective. There's no doubt about it. Linking the cost of nuclear to the threat posed to Medicare clearly has been a theme throughout this campaign. Let me just ask you both about what happens in the last 48 hours, last day or two of a campaign, because when you go back through history, often some of the most startling moments can happen. The Latham handshake happened in the last couple of days. I think, and Andrew, you'd remember this, the Scott Morrison barrelling that kid on the soccer field was in the last
I remember it well.
couple of days. Andrew, you can still get some little surprises at the end, can't you?
You can, and depending on where you are in your own polling, it determines where your risk is as well in that last week. I think you tend more towards playing it safe, knowing that if you do stuff up on a Thursday, Friday before an election night, you're in a world of pain because soft voters are looking in for perhaps for the first time in the entire campaign. So those days really matter. So you have to play it well, but also you've got to show that you're willing to move around the country and show that there's some kind of momentum. I remember on the last day of the campaign in 19, I think we went from Cairns all the way to Launceston with multiple stops on the way.
And that's about what, trying to show energy, hunger,
Yes.
that you've not stopped.
It's all about momentum, really, and it's just touching on those seats as well that are really in the balance. Showing up in those seats, most people don't think that makes a difference, but it does. It shows a level of care about your hometown, for instance, and that may swing some votes. We certainly saw that in 19 as well, particularly landing in Launceston on that night and leaving the next morning, and that seat got over the line.
Yeah, it can make a difference at the end. When we come to the day itself, Ryan, let's take the curtain back. Give us a bit of an insight into what happens on the day and on the night itself for the leaders.
Well, to Andrew's point, you've really got to ride the wave, and one thing it's quite distinctive, ride the wave of momentum, and one thing that's been quite distinctive, and has certainly come back in some of the research that I've been told about, is the Prime Minister's look genuinely happy on the campaign trail compared to Dutton. He's been smiling, he's been warm, and people have been responding well to that, so that's been really positive. In terms of election day, it's, get up first thing in the morning, last minute sort of breakfast TVs, then you sort of go around, do a few drop-ins on polling booths, you vote, do the big sort of, drop the ballot into the box to vote in your electorate. And then the afternoon, depending on the sort of style of the leader, sometimes they sort of take a little bit easier. Most of them, I suspect Anthony and Peter will both go all the way up to about 5, 6 o'clock, sort of still out there sort of punching away for every last vote. Then between 6 and at about 6 o'clock, it's a bit of let's just have a bit of a break, so rest, get some family together and a couple of close confidants and start watching the results sort of come in.
And is the victory and concession speech written well in advance of the day?
There are some people, the Prime Minister's speechwriter, James Newton's a very good friend of mine, he used to be Bill's speechwriter too, and he had a very big sort of, he was always very worried about, having that sort of concession speech sitting there just in case, you didn't want to sort of jinx things. So I suspect probably not. I think the bare bones of things are sort of written, but it really sort of comes together that night depending on how things sort of fall out, because you really don't know how it is. We might not even have a result on Saturday night. It might just be a
holding speech. Yeah.
Correct. We're heading in the right direction, hopeful. Yeah. Like it's a very different message to an emphatic victory or a sheer loss. So it really depends on how the cards sort of fall out on Saturday night.
Yeah, and Andrew, you've been there for one of each, a victory and a concession. Is your recollections of the day and the night similar to that?
Very similar, yeah. You do have a bare bones speech that you're going with, and then I remember 19 Scott writing a lot of that speech at his desk as the night was unfolding. I think the pivotal moment of that night was when Braddon was coming our way, and I think the PM looked at me and said, "Well, Braddon's coming our way. You know what that means," and being the bellwether seat. So I think you I think going into that night in 19, he had a firm idea what he was going to say, and that just making notes all along the way and making sure you hit those lines in that speech.
A couple of quick ones finally to you both. Was this the podcast election, and what did you think of the role of influencers and podcasters online? Ryan, did they make much of a difference this time?
I really think they have. And I think it's really positive. You see some of the old school traditional media sort of shake their fists at the clouds, complaining about the influence of younger sort of media publishers and independent publishers. But I think it's a really positive thing. It allows politicians to reach more people that are traditionally sort of disengaged from politics, and try and inspire and engage in that respect. And I think it has been much more influential this election, and I think that's really a positive thing.
I think you're right. If it's engaging younger people to politics, that can't be a bad thing. And it's an evolving space still too. So, Andrew, it'll probably be different in another 3 years from now. But how would you describe the role that's been played there this time?
Oh, it's been fantastic. It's been fantastic to bring in people that wouldn't naturally engage with politics, try and get an understanding. And look, to be fair, the coalition has to do a much better job in this space. And we saw a very good, effective campaign from the Trump administration before the last election to try and engage young men, particularly through social media, and they did an exceptional job. And it hasn't kind of translated to our jurisdiction yet, and they certainly need to get better. But it adds a wonderful flavour to it. And I hear the complaints from some coalitions saying, "Oh, it's all biased and it's all skewed towards the left," but that doesn't accurately display what's going on in young Australians. Yes, young females are becoming more progressive, but young men are becoming a little bit more conservative. So there's a cleaving that's happening, and parties have got to do a better job at going for both audiences. You've
got to reach the voters, and younger voters are making up a bigger proportion of the voting demographic. Look, finally, some predictions. I don't know who wants to go first here. Andrew, what's going to happen?
I think it'll be a Labor minority. I think Dutton will be more competitive than the polls suggest, just because it's a real seat-to-seat contest. Forget the 2PP and translating that to what could happen seat to seat. We're going to see some interesting swings in places that we don't usually get swings, and particularly peri-urban seats outside of Melbourne and outside of Sydney. They're massive margins, right? And the swing is going to be big, but whether it's enough to kind of get them in the bag. And I think how deep the Labor goes into minority will be determined by those seats in particular, where you can kind of pull one or two of those back.
And if the coalition ends up in the higher 60s, does Peter Dutton hold on to his position as leader?
I think 65 is a really good mark, isn't it? Yeah. If he can get above 65, I think that's a good job.
Below that?
I'll leave it for the party to kind of come up with those kind of considerations.
Yeah, cool. I think we can hear you. Ryan, predictions from you?
Oh, it's a dangerous game. But anyway, here we are. Look, I think if I had to put some money on it, I'd say Labor will finish with 74 seats.
So just shy of a 76 majority.
That's just my view. But there are some people who are much better informed and much better at this than I am, who are quite confident of a Labor victory in majority. So it remains to be seen. But to Andrew's point, I think that's right. It doesn't necessarily depend. The 2PP nationally doesn't matter nearly as much as where the votes actually fall. So, but it is interesting seeing the fragmentation of the Liberal Party's sort of primary vote has gone down 6-7 points since the start of the election. The PM, Anthony Albanese's ratings as preferred PM since the start of the election has gone up at 11 points. So it really does get hard for Peter Dutton now, where him campaigning in seats isn't necessarily the most positive thing that can happen in the last sort of 48 hours. So down here in Sturt, for example, in Adelaide, there's been a few remarks on the ground that the best thing that can happen for the Labor Party is for Peter Dutton to turn up, and lo and behold, he did late this week. So it's just interesting to see how that sort of happens seat by seat, and how it all sort of come out. It's
going to be fascinating to watch. After asking both of you to make a prediction, I'm not going to make one. So.
I was going to say, what's yours, Fizzy? Yeah.
I'm not going there. Hey, look, thank you both very much for joining us with your analysis at the end of what's been an interesting campaign. Can't wait to see the results, whatever they are, on the night. Good luck to both of you. Enjoy the evening.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Bizzy.
And thanks for your company as well. If you have any thoughts, do drop us a line at insiders@abc.net.au. And make sure you join us for election night on ABC TV. We'll be on air from 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. And after very little sleep, we'll be back for Insiders at 9 a.m. on Sunday. So I hope you can join us for as much of that as possible. We're all very much looking forward to seeing what happens. Bye for now.